The House will come to order.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Doorkeeper.
Mr. Speaker, I have a messenger from the Senate at the door of the House.
Admit the messenger.
Mr. Speaker, I'm directed by the Senate to inform the House that the Senate has taken the following action. The Senate has passed the following measures. SB 979, Campbell, relating to safety training for certain public school extracurricular activities. SB 1579, Betancourt, relating to procedures under the Public Information Law, including expedited responses and charges for bad faith requests. SB 2361, Parker, relating to the exemption from ad valorem taxation of property owned by an organization engaged primarily in performing charitable functions. SCR 25, Parker.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes Mr. Kane for a notice.
Pursuant to Rule 7, Section 37C, I hereby give notice that I intend in at least 1 hour's time to move to reconsider the vote by which House Bill 4918 was defeated.
Members, the notice will be entered into the journal. The chair lays out HB The chair lays out HB 1942 as a matter of postponed business on second reading. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 1942 by Leach, relating to the regulation of sports wagering, requiring occupational permits, authorizing fees, imposing a tax, decriminalizing wagering on certain sports events, creating criminal offenses, providing administrative penalties.
The chair recognizes Mr. Leach to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, hope you enjoyed your dinner. Thank you, Chairman Lozano. Members, I'm going to try again tomorrow on the constitutional amendment. I'm hopeful and expectant that we can maybe get over 100 tomorrow. And if so, this is the enabling legislation that will provide that framework, that strong, regulatory, trustworthy framework that will achieve all of the objectives that I just brought up, including, importantly, I want to mention how important it is that we protect our children, we protect our minors from this activity. And as part of this bill, we're going to prohibit it, direct targeting, direct advertising to minors. It's an important part of this legislation. I would ask that you support this. We've got deeply anchored organizations and Texans who care deeply about the safety and security of our children in our state. And they're a part of this bill, and you can read all about it in the materials in front of you. I'd ask that you support this enabling legislation. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Mr. Shaheen, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of House Bill 1942 under Rule 4, Section 32C on the grounds that the bill analysis does not substantially comply with the reporting rules and is material misleading.
Please bring your point of order down front. The point of order has been withdrawn. The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Leach.
The chair recognizes Mr. Leach to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment adds the NASCAR move adoption of the amendment.
Mr. Leach sends up an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. The question occurs on the adoption of the amendment. The record of vote has been requested. The clerk ring the bell. Show Mr. Leach voting aye. Show Ms. Hull voting aye. Ms. Lawson voting nay. Have all members voted? There being 98 ayes and 30 nays, the amendment is adopted. Following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Moody.
The chair recognizes Mr. Moody to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. As most of us do, we listen intently to our staff on a myriad of concepts and thoughts and ideas. And one of the things that we were talking about as this bill approached the floor was some of the other things that people engage in betting on other than sports betting. And so what this amendment would do would add a reality TV show. If you're Bachelor Nation, right, you might be part of a fantasy bachelor league. I know we've got Jolanda Jones, right? People do the same for Survivor as well. And so wanted to have this conversation about this concept. I did talk to Chairman Leach about it before I came up here. It's not something we'd had a long time to discuss. And based on our conversation before I approached the mic, I'm going to go ahead and withdraw this. But I do think this is some conduct, again, that we talked about earlier. This is something that our constituents are engaged in on a daily basis, whether it be the shows I mentioned before or others, and whether we want to make them criminals for engaging in that, I think is certainly worthy of discussion. But at this time, I am going to withdraw the amendment.
The amendment has been withdrawn. The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Goldman.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
Amendment by Goldman.
The chair recognizes Mr. Goldman to explain the amendment.
Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, my amendment includes the National Lacrosse League. Go Panther City. Move adoption. It's acceptable to the author.
Mr. Goldman sends up an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. The question occurs on adoption of the amendment. This is a record vote. The clerk ring the bell. Show Mr. Leach voting aye. Mr. Goldman voting aye. Show Mr. Rosenthal voting aye. Mr. Leach voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 97 ayes and 37 nays, the amendment is adopted. The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Turner.
The chair recognizes Mr. Turner to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, first off, I want to thank Chairman Leach for his hard work on this bill. I heard this bill in State Affairs several weeks ago, and I know how much effort he has put into this over these last several weeks. And I also appreciate him working with me on this amendment, which is going to be acceptable to him. Let me explain what this amendment does. One of my reservations that I expressed in the committee hearing initially, while I'm philosophically in support of this legislation, I want to make sure that we're getting the best value for Texas if we're going to do this, get the best value for our constituents, the taxpayers of the state. And so I really took some time to try to learn what other states have done and what the right balance is there to make, if we're going to have online sports betting, that we do it in a way that is welcoming to the businesses who participate in online sports betting, but also make sure we get a good return for the people of Texas. And that's what this amendment is about. And again, I thank Chairman Leach for working with me on it. Briefly, what the amendment does, changes the tax rate to 15%. It increases the wagering permit fee to $2 million. It also sunsets the exclusion of wagers placed using free bets or promotional credits after 1 year. And I move adoption.
Mr. Turner sends up an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. The question occurs on the adoption of the amendment. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Mr. Leach voting aye. Mr. Turner voting aye. Mr. Rosenthal voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 99 ayes and 42 nays, the amendment is adopted. The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Thompson of Harris.
The chair recognizes Ms. Thompson Harris to explain the amendment.
Mr. Speaker and members, all I want to do, I've been asking the chairman, since this sporting authority is going to be in existence, if we vote in existence, since we are betting on sports, then we should be getting a little revenue to repair these stadiums so that the public won't have to repair it. If they're going to be making the money, why don't they give us the money to repair the stadiums that they're going to be using? Is it okay? Okay, the chairman said, the author said I need to pull it down, I will.
Thank you, Ms. T. The amendment has been withdrawn. Mr. Morales of Maverick on the floor of the House. Does any members wish to speak for or against the bill? The chair recognizes Mr. Leach to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really appreciate your time. This is a good piece of legislation, and with that, I move passage.
The question occurs on the passage of engrossment HB 1942. This is a record vote. The clerk ring the bell. Strict enforcement has been requested. Strict enforcement has been granted. Members, please vote from your desk. Show Mr. Leach voting aye. Members, you must vote for yourself from your desk. Members, you must vote for yourself from your desk. I cannot. Have all members voted? There being 84 ayes, 52 nays, HB 1942 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out HB 2843 as a matter of postponed business on second reading. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2843 by Kimball, relating to the authorization, licensing, and regulation of casino gaming and sports wagering in the state, to the creation, powers, and duties of the Texas Gaming Commission to support the horse racing industry and reform of horse racing and greyhound racing conducted by certain persons, and to other provisions related to gambling, imposing and authorizing administrative and civil penalties, imposing taxes, imposing and authorizing fees, requiring occupational licenses, creating criminal offenses.
The chair recognizes Mr. Kimball for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I request unanimous consent to postpone further consideration of HB 2843 until Thursday, May 11th, immediate following second reading consideration of HB 1942.
Members heard the motion. The objection, chair has none so ordered. The chair lays out on the chair recognizes Mr. Kimball for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request unanimous consent to postpone further consideration of HB 2843 till Thursday, May 11th, immediate following third reading consideration of HJR 102.
Members heard the motion. The objection, chair has none so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HJR 134. The clerk will read the resolution.
HJR 134 by Bonin, proposing a constitutional amendment to abolish the office of County Treasurer of Galveston County.
The chair recognizes Dr. Bonin to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This legislation affects one county only, Galveston County. It does not affect any other county in the state of Texas. And what it does is it would allow the voters of Texas and Galveston County to decide whether or not to keep the Galveston County Treasurer's office. So by way of background, the current county treasurer in Galveston ran for election on the platform that he would eliminate the office were he to be elected. And he had 2 opponents, and he won very convincingly. Since that time, the county commissioners court and 11 of the 12 municipalities have adopted resolutions in support of this legislation, and the 12th said they supported it, but they don't adopt resolutions. The county has made provisions already for many of the functions that would be under the purview of other elected officials, such as the county clerk, state district judges, and the commissioners themselves. And should this legislation pass, what would happen is the voters in Galveston County would have to adopt this decision with a majority vote and would also have to pass statewide. With that, I move passage.
The question occurs on adoption of the resolution. There's a record vote required by the Constitution. The clerk will ring the bell. Sir Dr. Bonin voting aye. Mr. Kemple voting aye. Mr. Goldman voting aye. Mr. Patterson voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 106 ayes and 32 nays, HJR 134 is adopted. The chair lays out on second reading HJR 146. The clerk will read the resolution.
HJR 146 by Capriglione, proposing a constitutional amendment relating to the right to own, hold, and use a mutually agreed upon medium of exchange.
The chair recognizes Mr. Capriglione to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HJR 146 recognizes and protects the rights of Texans to use any mutually agreed upon medium of exchange when trading and contracting for goods and services. I move passage.
The question occurs on the passage of the resolution HJR 146. This is a record vote required by the Constitution. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Capriglione voting aye. Have all members voted? There have been 139 ayes and 2 nays. HJR 146 is adopted. The chair lays out on second reading HJR 172. The clerk will read the resolution.
HJR 172 by Cook, proposing a constitutional amendment authorizing the legislature to enact laws providing for a court to grant a commutation of punishment to certain individuals serving a term of imprisonment.
The chair recognizes Mr. Cook to explain the resolution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill results from a criminal justice reform interim study committee that I was able to serve on thanks to Speaker Phelan this past interim. This is an opportunity for a prosecutor to exercise prosecutorial discretion, which we've talked about earlier, and this gives the prosecutor the opportunity to revisit the sentencing. The HCR amends Article 5 of the Texas Constitution to permit the legislature by general law to allow a court to grant a commutation of punishment to certain individuals. HB 418, which is the enabling legislation that we'll hear later, permits the state's attorney to file a motion for commutation of punishment in any district court in which an inmate has been convicted. The courts must consider the inmate's disciplinary and rehabilitative record while incarceration, as well as the risk of reoffending. Also, victims are required to be notified of this resentencing motion, and the bill only applies to nonviolent offenses. Punishment can only be reduced and is not appealable. I move passage.
The question occurs on the passage of HJR 172. This is a record vote required by the Constitution. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Cook voting aye. Show Mr. Kane voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 130 ayes and 13 nays, HJR 172 is adopted. The chair lays out on second reading HJR 25. The clerk will read the bill.
HJR 25 by Zwiener, proposing a constitutional amendment to authorize the legislature to exempt from ad valorem taxation the portion of the assessed value of a person's property that is attributable to the installation in or on the property of a rainwater harvesting or graywater system.
The chair recognizes Ms. Zwiener for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, members, I move to postpone HJR 25 till 10 a.m. Thursday, May 11th.
Members heard the motion. Objecting chair hears none, so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HB 4217. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 4217 by Chalks-Clare, relating to the powers of certain public utility agencies, granting the power of eminent domain.
The chair recognizes Ms. Troxclair to explain the bill.
This bill allows the Western Travis County Public Utility Agency to improve its infrastructure and provide water to its customers. Move passage.
The question occurs on passing engrossment of HB 4217. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 4217 is passed in engrossment. Members, the next bill on the calendar is HB 3480. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading SB 1319. The clerk read the bill.
SB 1319 by Huffman, relating to the reporting of certain overdose information and the mapping of overdoses for public safety purposes.
The chair recognizes Ms. Turner to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, currently there's no uniform means or single location for emergency medical technicians or other health and public safety officials to track and share overdose information. SB 1319 connects public health and public safety officials with technology that allows them to share and review overdose data. The bill requires authorized medical personnel and law enforcement within geographical jurisdiction to make a report of an overdose of a controlled substance by requiring them to enter into a participation agreement with an entity that maintains a computerized system for mapping overdoses. This is a free product that's out there and will help our public health and public safety officials respond to the overdose epidemic. I move passage.
The question occurs on passage of third reading of SB 1319. This is a record vote. The clerk read the bill. Mr. Turner voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 118 ayes, 21 nays, SB 1319 is passed at third reading. Mr. Turner moves to lay House Bill 3480 on the table, subject to call the objection. Chair hears on this order. Members, the next bill on the calendar is HB 3562. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading SB 1650. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 1650 by Parker, relating to durable powers of attorney and the construction of certain powers conferred in those durable powers of attorney.
The chair recognizes Mr. Smithy to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill is a cleanup bill on durable power of attorneys. I will move passage.
The question occurs on passage of third reading of SB 1650. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. SB 1650 is passed at third reading. Mr. Smithy moves to lay House Bill 3562 on the table, subject to call to objection. Chair hears none, so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HB 2647. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2647 by Sherman, relating to allowing the Board of Trustees of certain school districts to create a non-voting student trustee position on the board.
The chair recognizes Dr. Buckley to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to lay out this great bill by our colleague, Representative Sherman. House Bill 2647 simply allows a Board of Trustees to appoint a student member if they wish, and it's a non-voting position, and I move passage.
The question occurs on passing the engrossment of HB 2647. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 2647 is passed to engrossment. Member of the next bill on the calendar is HB 717. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading SB 888. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 888 by Perry, relating to fire escape exemptions for certain courthouses.
The chair recognizes Mr. Frank to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill simply exempts historic county courthouses built before 1989 and in counties of less than 50,000 people from some state laws that are not financially viable for some counties. Move passage.
The question occurs on passage of the third reading of SB 888. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. SB 888 is passed at third reading. Mr. Frank moves to lay House Bill 717 on the table, subject to call the objection. Chair hears none, so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HB 1613. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 1613 by Shine, relating to the provision of state aid to certain local governments to offset the cost of the exemption from ad valorem taxation of the residence homestead of a 100% or totally disabled veteran.
The chair recognizes Mr. Shine to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker and members, Texas is the home of 15 military installations. Installations contribute an estimated $114 billion to the state's economy annually. The communities that surround these military installations are home to the majority of the 100% disabled veterans. They're the most disproportionately impacted by the state-granted 100% homestead exemption for our completely disabled veterans. What House Bill 1613 does, it will create a state trust fund by the Comptroller's Office to reimburse the communities that are most disproportionately impacted by this exemption. I know that we are all honored to have so many veterans choose Texas as our home. It's time that we ensure their quality of life in the communities that they live in, that we support them. Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
The question occurs in passing the resolution to HB 1613. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr.
Thank
Shine
you.
voting aye. Mr. Wilson voting aye. Mr. Rainey voting aye. Ms. Garcia voting aye. Mr. Darby voting aye. Dr. Buckley voting aye. Mr. Lopez voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 135,009 nays, HB 1613 is passed through Grossman. Chair lays out on second reading HB 3757. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 3757 by Wilson went to the authority of a taxing unit other than a school district to establish limitation on the amount of ad valorem taxes that the taxing unit may impose on the residence homesteads of individuals who are disabled or elderly and their surviving spouses.
The chair recognizes Mr. Wilson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB 3757 is enacting legislation to the HGR we adopted earlier. Essentially, it chooses to grant a tax freeze to anyone who is disabled or who is age 65 or older. And with that, I have an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Wilson.
The chair recognizes Mr. Wilson to explain the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The floor amendment for this bill makes the income limit optional and strikes the petition language within the bill. And I believe there's also, and it's good with all.
Ms. Collier, for what purpose?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, will the gentleman yield for a question?
Would the gentleman yield for a question?
Gladly.
The gentleman yields.
Colonel Wilson, I wanted to go over your amendment because yesterday it was going a little bit fast, so I didn't get to catch everything. I saw that you removed the income restrictions, and then now you have this amendment, and you put them back in as an optional, as an option?
Yes, ma'am. No, we didn't actually. Yes, at the end of the day, we were looking for the opportunity to give that board that authorizes that tax freeze the option to look at the income of those individuals that it serves.
And so that's what this amendment does.
It just gives them the flexibility to consider that. That's all.
Okay, because it says a lot of things, and I see
It
does not
does.
exceed 200%, and I just want to make sure that that's the intent, is to give them the option to consider the income of the individual who's either over 65 or disabled.
That's correct. It just gives them the option, and also it removes the petition, so they don't feel as if they have to be pressured to even grant this. It's permissive.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. And
Mr. Wilson sends out an amendment. The amendment is acceptably offered with objection to the adoption amendment. Chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Darby.
The chair recognizes Mr. Darby to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in some counties where a person may own multiple pieces of property, when they receive their tax bill, it's hard to determine the tax liability for each property without knowing the corresponding CAD account number. This amendment creates a uniform process for every tax assessor to adhere to for the betterment and clarity for property owners. It is acceptable to the author. Move adoption.
Mr. Darby sends out an amendment. The amendment is acceptably offered with objection to the adoption amendment. Chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Mr. Wilson to close on the bill.
thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a great thing that we're doing for our seniors. Doesn't matter if they're a retired teacher. What matters is, or somebody who is retired on fixed income. Inflation has hit our seniors hard, and this is just a little something that reinforce that we care about our seniors and their ability to live in this economy. And with that, I move passage.
The question occurs in passage of the engrossment HB 3757. There's a record vote. The clerk ring the bell. Show Mr. Wilson voting aye. Show Mr. Rainey voting aye. Mr. Lopez voting aye. Mr. Kane voting aye. Have all members voted? There have been 132 ayes and 12 nays. HB 3757 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 118. The clerk read the bill.
HB 118 by Cortez, leading to health benefit plan coverage for certain tests to detect prostate cancer.
The chair recognizes Mr. Cortez to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 118 will ensure that men at the highest risk of developing aggressive prostate cancer can access prostate cancer screenings. This will eliminate the unnecessary barrier of cost sharing for prostate cancer screenings. I move passage.
The question occurs in passing the engrossment of HB 118. This is record vote. The clerk will read the bill. Show Mr. Cortez voting aye. Mr. Lopez voting aye. Mr. Rainey voting aye. Have all members voted? There have There being 102 ayes, 37 nays, HB 118 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 4837. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 4837 by Lopez Abair, relating to a veteran housing program established by the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
The chair recognizes Mr. Lopez to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill requires the TDJ to dedicate specific cell block or dormitories for the use of inmates who are veterans of the United States Armed Forces. This is following a recommendation made by the previous legislature's Committee on Defense and Veterans Affairs based on interim charges. Mr. Chairman, Speaker, I do have a...
Mr. Wilson, for what purpose?
Yes, sir. Is the member available for questions?
Would the gentleman yield for questions?
Of course.
The gentleman yields.
All right, thank you. Representative Lopez, appreciate you bringing this legislation. At the end of the day, is this something that came from the interim study within the Defense and Veterans Affairs Committee?
That's correct. The interim study kind of indicated that that was something that needed to be recommended, and we took action on it, and this is the outcome of that.
Yeah. And I believe that you're about to lay out an amendment. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct.
Okay. I'll hold on the questions on that. But at the end of the day, what we saw is that when it comes to care for veterans who are basically incarcerated, that there was issues associated with even identifying veterans, and then, of course, understanding how to treat it. They weren't acknowledged or identified, and that's what pushed this legislation.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, great. And I'll hold for the amendment.
Thank you.
The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Lopez Abair.
The chair recognizes Mr. Lopez to explain the amendment.
Yeah, the clarifying amendment simply defines what a veteran is, which is someone that has received an honorable discharge.
Mr. Wilson, for what purpose?
Member available for questions.
The gentleman yield for a question.
Of course.
He is for questions.
So within this, we basically didn't go with a basic definition of veteran. We actually increased it to make sure that this is a person who actually served and could have potentially been in combat.
Of course, and served honorably is that to be able to earn the honorable discharge.
And so therefore they have an honorable discharge regardless.
Absolutely.
This is a great bill, sir. Thank you for bringing this for our veterans.
It's my honor, sir. So I move passage.
Mr. Lopez sent an amendment. The amendment is acceptably offered. Objection to the adoption amendment. Chair hears on the amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Mr. Lopez to close on the bill.
Move passage.
The question occurs to pass in the engrossment of HB 4837. There's record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Mr. Lopez voting aye. Mr. Garcia voting aye. Mr. Rainey voting aye. Mr. Wilson voting aye. Mr. Lozano voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 110 ayes and 37 nays, HB 4837 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 1338. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 1338 by Rainey, relating to the participation of community-based organizations in workforce training programs funded by the Skills Development Fund.
The chair recognizes Mr. Rainey to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a really good bill. We've been dealing with some that have taken a lot of time and dealt with very few. This bill deals with workforce and is good for our workforce development. Move passage.
The question occurs to pass in engrossment of HB 1338. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 1338 is passed in engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading HB 940. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 940 by Dutton, relating to the establishment of the Private Child Care Task Force.
The chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the Economic Policy Institute found that one of the biggest overhead costs for families that families bear in Texas is child care. The United States Department of Health and Human Services standards reveal that child care for infants is affordable for only about 16% of Texas families. According to Children at Risk, for Austin families, for the average family, 25% or a portion of their income goes toward child care. What this bill does, members, is it sets up a seven-member commission, one member appointed by the governor, 3 appointed by the speaker, and 3 appointed by the lieutenant governor, to take a look at the availability and affordability of child care in Texas. There is an amendment that I have, and it simply clarifies what the purpose of the child care task force is.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Dutton.
The chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment, like I said, it just clarifies the purpose for which the child care task force exists. It specifically adds scholarships, waiting lists, pre-K partnerships, and methods to strengthen the child care industry. And I move passage.
Mr. Dutton sends an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the authors. Objection to the adoption of the amendment. The chair hears on the amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Mr. Dutton to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Just like the bill you heard previously about workforce, without adequate and affordable child care, we will have no workforce. And so I move passage of House Bill 940.
The question occurs to pass on engrossment with HB 940. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Dutton voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 87 ayes and 16 nays, HB 940 is passed on engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 322. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 322 by Cortez, relating to certain evidentiary presumptions and burdens of proof in determining a defendant's incompetency to stand trial or defendant's insanity in a criminal case.
The chair recognizes Mr. Cortez to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, at just 20 years old, San Antonio resident Kishana Mitchell died in a fatal car accident at the hands of Gregory Sue. At the intersection, Mr. Sue sped through a stop sign and fatally injured and killed Kishana. Under current case law, when a defendant is charged with a crime and found not guilty because of mental insanity, they are presumed to be mentally insane by default for any potential future cases. House Bill 22 will remove this prior assumption of insanity for future cases. I do have an amendment.
Mr. Canales, for what purpose?
The gentleman would yield.
Would the gentleman yield for questions?
Of course.
The gentleman yields.
So currently, the law in Texas says if you were found insane by mental defect, you're presumed to be insane till found otherwise right now?
Currently, if you're found to be insane on a previous case, that would apply to any future potential cases.
Are you aware that for the insanity defense, no matter what, on any case, a judge has to hold a hearing 30 days prior?
That a judge has to have a hearing. It's our understanding that right now that that's not required and that this would require a mandated mental health professional pre-trial assessment to determine the defendant's insanity for that new specific charge.
Do you know what the elements of insanity are?
The elements of insanity? No, I would.
In order to be proved or to be able to use the defense of insanity, do you know, it's called the McNaughton test. Are you aware of that?
No, I was not aware of that.
Okay. Do you know how long the law that you're trying to change has been in place in the state of Texas?
I'm not advised.
Okay. So, and the case that you're citing to the body is a case from your hometown?
Yes, a constituent lost her daughter in a case, and unfortunately that individual that was the reason that her daughter was killed was not able to be charged properly because of a previous insanity case that he had, and so.
So are you aware of the actual particulars of the procedural problems in that case, or is that just the story that you've got, that he wasn't able to be charged? Because the reality is that if a prosecutor believes that someone is no longer insane, he can allege those to, at any time, to a district court or to a county court at law. He can allege that he believes the person is no longer insane, and 30 days prior to that hearing, that court has to have a hearing to determine whether at the time of the mental defect or disease, at the time of the commission of the crime, that person was mentally insane. And so you're flipping probably 100 years of jurisprudence on its head right now because of a case, and I'm terribly sorry to that family and who they lost, but what I'm telling you is you're flipping a presumption on its head that's hundreds of years of jurisprudence in Texas, and for this one case, and I don't believe that it's necessary because the reality is that if a prosecutor's doing their job, and I believe we've got several former prosecutors in here, if the prosecutor believes that that person is now cured of that mental defect, are you aware that that prosecutor can then file a motion and then have a hearing to make the secondary determination whether that person is still suffering from the mental disease or defect?
And we work closely with our district attorney's office to determine this bill and worked to ensure that they had input and had a good understanding of what we were doing.
I'm aware that any prosecutor would love this because they're flipping the burden back on the defendant. What I'm telling you is, are you aware that right now the process exists that if a prosecutor believes that the person no longer suffers from the mental defect that they did at the time of committing the original crime where they were found insane, are you aware that there is already a process in place and that you are flipping now the burden back, giving the state an advantage when they already have the advantage and they can file the motion to begin with anyway?
Our goal is to ensure that whatever defendant might be facing whatever charge, that they are reevaluated for that specific insanity, that previous insanity plea.
And what I'm submitting to you, and I'm asking you if you understand or if you don't understand, that it already exists in law.
Thank you.
That the prosecutor can do this if he believes the person is now mentally sane.
And we work closely with our local prosecutor's office to work on this.
Mr. Cortez, I'm not trying to trick you into answering a question. I'm asking you, do you understand that at this point in time in a Texas jurisprudence, if a district attorney believes that the person no longer suffers from the mental defect that allowed them to use this insanity defense in the previous case, if they believe that that person no longer suffers from this mental defect, are you aware that there is a process?
Thank you. You've made me aware. Thank you.
Okay, so right now, what you're doing is you're now flip-flopping the burden and over 100 years of jurisprudence to now put it back on the defendant, who was already a judge insane, rather than the state making the motion. Just somebody to do their job.
Yes, we worked closely with our DA's office. Thank you.
I've heard you say that.
I did.
I caught it the first 4 times. I appreciate you. Thank you.
I do have an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Cortez.
The chair recognizes Mr. Cortez to explain the amendment.
Thank you, members. This amendment just renames this bill to the Keisha Mitchell Act in memory of the resident from San Antonio who was killed. Rashana, this is acceptable.
Mr. Cortez sends an amendment. The amendment is acceptable. The author's objection to the adoption of the amendment. The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Mr. Cortez to close on the bill.
I move passage.
Members, the question occurs to pass on the engrossment of HB 322. A record vote has been requested. A record vote being granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Mr. Cortez voting aye. Mr. Canales voting nay. Ms. Gomez voting nay. Have all members voted? There being 75 ayes, 63 nays, HB 322 is passed the engrossment. The following announcement, the clerk will read the announcement. Is Mr. Landgraf on the floor of the House? The chair recognizes Mr. Landgraf for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House grant permission for the Committee on Environmental Regulation to meet while the House is in session today at 9 p.m. in room 1W14, the Agriculture Museum, to consider pending, referred, and committee business.
Members heard the motion and objection. Chair hears none, so ordered. Following announcement, the clerk will read the announcement.
The Committee on Environmental Regulation will meet today at 9 p.m. in room 1W14, Agriculture Museum, in a formal meeting to consider pending, referred, and committee business.
Members, the next bill on the calendar is HB 131. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading SB 68. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 68 by Zaffarini related to excuse absences from public school for certain students to visit a professional's workplace for a career investigation day.
The chair recognizes Mr. Murr to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members, this legislation provides for 2 days of career investigation for junior and senior year students to visit a professional's workplace for the purpose of determining their students' interest in pursuing a professional career. Move passage.
The question occurs in passage of third reading of SB 68. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. SB 68 is passed to third reading. Mr. Murr moves to lay House Bill 13 on the table. Subject to call to objection. Chair has none so ordered. Chair lays out on second reading HB 2726. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2726 by click relating to the practice of nursing, including disciplinary procedures of the Texas Board of Nursing, authorizing a fee.
The chair recognizes Ms. Click to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB 2726 is designed to ensure fair, consistent, and equal application of disciplinary procedures with the Board of Nursing. I move passage.
The question occurs to pass the engrossment of HB 2726. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 2726 passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 997. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 997 by Munoz relating to municipal authority to prohibit police or fire department employees from circulating or signing certain employee petitions.
The chair recognizes Mr. Munoz to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Remember, this would allow a firefighter or police officer to circulate petition, collect signatures in the municipality. Move passage.
The question occurs on passing the engrossment of HB 997. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 997 is passed the engrossment. Members, the next bill on the calendar is HB 2605. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading SB 1499. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 1499 by Nichols related to the funding of certain port projects.
The chair recognizes Mr. Canales to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, SB 1499 makes tweaks to the existing Port Access Fund that ensure that all ports will benefit from the fund. The state investments can flow through to some of the state's most crucial economic engines. Phil Cortez is going to be a joint author on this one. Move passage.
The question occurs on passing the engrossment of SB, pass the third reading of SB 1499. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. SB 1499 is passed the third reading. Mr. Canales moves to lay House Bill 2605 on the table, subject to call to objection. Chair has done so. Chair lays out on second reading HB 1678. The clerk read the bill.
HB 1678 by Chaton relating to a local remote learning program offered by a public school for certain students at risk of dropping out of school.
The chair recognizes Mr. Chaton to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1678 establishes a local remote learning program offered by public schools for certain students with risk of dropping out of school.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Turner, for what purpose?
The gentleman yield for some questions.
The gentleman yield for questions.
Sure.
The gentleman yields.
Thank you, Representative Chaton. So, can you just explain? I was just reading about this bill, and I think it sounds good, but I want to make sure I fully understand. So this is a remote learning program for public school students or charter school students. Is that right?
I believe you asked if this is a virtual. Can you repeat your question? I'm sorry.
This establishes a remote learning program for public school students and charter school students?
So currently, and this was brought to me by the superintendent for Lamar Consolidated ISD. In their school district, currently they're able to implement a virtual program for those students that are most likely to drop out, and it's asynchronous, and they're able to do it right now. This is going to allow them to continue to do it with the funding.
Okay, so is the current program grandfathered or sunsetted or something?
I'm not aware of which program allows them to do it currently with funding. This would allow them to keep on doing it with funding.
Okay. So is it specific to one school district, or is this statewide?
This is statewide, but
It's
it was
statewide,
brought,
okay.
the idea and program was put together by the superintendent from Lamar Consolidated ISD, and they've had great success with ensuring students are able to complete their high school diploma.
I see. Okay. And so how does it work? They identify students who they deem to be at risk of dropping out, and then encourage them to enroll in this program, or encourage their parents to enroll them in this program?
That's correct. So they would identify a student, work with that parent closely to ensure that there's good collaboration with the parent, student, and teacher, and they would, I believe it's 4 hours of classroom time per day for completing their regular curriculum hours. It would be in classroom, just being able to do it virtually.
Okay. And does the bill establish statewide standards for this type of program, or does each district have discretion on how they set up the program?
The statewide standards, I believe, are already in place.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
The statewide standards are already in place. It would continue those.
Okay, so this just allows any school district in the state to offer this type of remote learning program specifically for students they have determined are at risk of dropping out.
That's correct. So they're already running the program. This will allow them to keep on doing it with funding.
And is there specific criteria to assess what students are at risk of dropping out versus which students are not, or is it subjective?
It's allowing the school district to identify those students and work with parents to determine if this is viable and makes sense for that student to enroll in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, move passage.
The question occurs to pass the engrossment of HB 1678. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 1678 is passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 993. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 993 by Munoz, citing to Sheriff's Department of Civil Service Systems in certain counties.
The chair recognizes Mr. Munoz to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, just gives the option to appeal a civil service decision and move passage.
The question occurs on passage of the engrossment of HB 993. This is a record vote. The clerk will read the bill. Show Mr. Munoz voting aye. Have all members voted? Mr. Canales voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 79 ayes and 64 nays, HB 993 is passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 503. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 503 by Wu, relating to the jurisdiction of juvenile court over certain persons and to the sealing and non-disclosure of certain juvenile records.
The chair recognizes Mr. Wu to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a bill that we did last time, and we're trying again. This helps provide kids a true second chance. It gives them a permissive ability to request have their records sealed. It is not a guarantee. It is not a shall. It is a may. They have to request it, and the prosecutors get to object to it. It's not a sure thing. It's still up to the judge, and this will help them get a true second chance at living a normal life. And I do have an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Wu.
The chair recognizes Mr. Wu to explain the amendment.
Members, this amendment is a cleanup of a drafting error. There was a request to put in some stuff for the prosecutors, and we were told later that what we put in was redundant and unnecessary, so we're taking it out so it's cleaner. Move adoption.
Mr. Wu sends out an amendment. The amendment is acceptably offered with objection to the adoption amendment. The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. The chair recognizes Mr. Wu to close on the bill.
Move passage.
The question occurs on passing the engrossment of HB 503. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Wu voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 65 ayes and 81 nays, HB 503 fails to pass the engrossment. The chair recognizes Dr. Buckley for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House grant permission for the Committee on Public Education to meet while the House is in session today at 9:15 p.m. in room E2036 to consider pending, referred, and committee business.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Bales, for what purpose?
Does the gentleman yield?
The gentleman yield for questions.
Yeah, I yield.
Chairman Buckley, yes. I know we gave a long speech about how we handle bills, about decorum in the body on the Herrera Amendment and such. And you plainly stated that when we have bills, especially those that are very substantial, that it's important that we give those thoughtful consideration, that we have proper time for deliberation, full transparency to the body. Is your intention to bring a bill and a sizable committee substitute somewhere to the tune of 80 pages?
We're going to take up pending business in the committee if the House grants permission.
Is an 80-page substitution part of your intention?
There's a bill that is comprised of multiple subjects that we have had hearings on over the last several weeks to include 16 hours on one subject alone.
Very aware. I was able to listen to that actual testimony. Of that 80-page bill that you have that committee substitute, starting on page 50, are you aware of what the top line of page 50 actually states?
I don't have the bill in front of me, and I don't
have
think
the
that's
bill.
an appropriate question.
I'll help you read that.
Yeah.
It's Article 3, Education Savings Account Program. Is it your intention to bring this bill forward as a vehicle, to bypass the hearing process, to present this as a committee substitute, and then force the body to take a vote on that without the same transparency that you have demanded that this body give to other bills?
The component of that section was heard, discussed, and witness testimony for 16 hours.
Last I checked,
April 11th.
You had several bills that actually dealt with education savings account and vouchers. What is the status of those bills, and have you voted any of those bills out of your committee to be deliberated on the floor?
Those bills are still pending in committee.
But you have chose not to give any of those bills an actual vote and vote those out. However, you're trying to bring an 80-page substitution to this body and force a vote without that thoughtful deliberation, that transparency in the same committee hearing for public input that you have so deliberately requested on future bills?
We have heard the subject matter for 16 hours on April the 11th, and to include 80 additional hours of testimony on many of the subjects covered in the committee substitute. That could be
If
taken
we've heard
up
that
as pending
testimony
business.
on those bills, then you should be able to actually vote those bills out. Are any of these bills in their entirety here, or you've actually picked and chose the particular language that you want brought together, and there's been no collective hearing on a bill which would be the same as the 80 pages which you are asking this body to vote on?
The committee will take up the committee substitute if the House grants permission for us to meet this evening.
Gentleman's time's expired.
I formally object, and I request a record vote on this.
The chair recognizes Mr. Bells to speak in opposition on the motion to meet.
Members of this body, if we stand for anything, it's for doing what is right. We give bills the opportunity to be heard in committee. We give the public an opportunity to give their input. We're able to have that conversation. We're able to know what their feelings are and what their thoughts are. There was extensive hearings that the Education Committee heard to handle bills such as ESAs, Education Savings Account, also known as vouchers. The committee chose not to give any of those bills a vote because there were problems with those bills. The numbers quite simply didn't add up. So we have a motion now to force this body to accept. This is the 80 pages. This is the 80 pages, and I plainly ask you, is it the chairman's intention to force these 80 pages, which are unvetted, they are unheard in committee? This is not the right way to do this, and we are better than this in this committee. Our kids matter in the state of Texas, and they are better than backroom, shady dealings, which is what this is right here.
Members, we will not engage in personalities. Mr. Canales,
Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman would yield.
The gentleman yields.
So I'm not part of the committee, but I want to ask you a question. So I'm trying to understand what exactly is actually transpiring here. The permission to meet the Committee on Public Education to consider this bill, and this bill is 80 pages different from the original bill?
Correct.
And the bill that hearing was held, is there going to be an actual hearing with witnesses on this bill?
There's no intention to have a hearing. If there is a hearing, then I think as a body and as a chairman, I will never stand in the way for transparency and the ability to have a hearing and let the public be heard. But that is not the intention of this motion.
So you're not asking that this bill not be heard. You're asking that a hearing be held so that witnesses can actually come forward and testify and actually comment on the compilation of what's now before you.
That is correct.
Thank
I have
you.
no objection whatsoever to this bill being heard.
Thank you, Representative. Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Canales, for what purpose?
I move that the comments that be reduced to writing on the permission to meet the Committee of Public Education.
Members of the motion, the objection, chair has none so ordered. Dr. Buckley has asked permission from the House for the Committee on Public Education to meet. The question occurs on the. He's already spoken.
No, this is subject to the 3-minute pro con rule.
He did. We done. Yes. The question occurs on permission to meet from the Committee on Public Education. A record vote has been requested. The record vote has been granted. The clerk ring the bell. Should Dr. Buckley voting aye? Should Mr. Bales voting nay? Have all members voted? There being 65 ayes and 76 nays, permission to meet has not been granted. The chair lays out on second reading, HB 463. The clerk read the bill.
HB 463 by whole, related to medical examinations for certain children entering the conservatorship of the Department of Family and Protective Services.
The chair recognizes Ms. Hull for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to postpone further consideration of House Bill 463 until June 1st, 2023, and I'd like to take a moment to briefly explain why. This bill was attempting to clarify existing law regarding medical exams for children removed by DFPS. For 6 years, DFPS decided to misinterpret this law. Commissioner Muth said after reviewing current law and the legislative history that the department's implementation was not consistent with existing law, and they would change their processes to align with current law, which is currently underway and will be effective September 1st. Thank you to Chair Click and to Chair Frank for your leadership and work on this for the past 6 years. It is frustrating when we pass laws here and agencies do not implement those with fidelity. Thank you to Commissioner Muth for her leadership and DFPS for their willingness to make sure the agency is faithfully implementing state law without the need for additional legislation.
Members of the motion, the objection, chair has none so ordered. Members, we're moving on to page 6. Mr. Frank, for what purpose?
Mr. Speaker, I move to have the remarks of Representative Hall reduced to writing and placed in the journal.
Members of the motion, the objection, chair has none so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading, HB 1282. The clerk read the bill.
HB 1282 by PLISA, relating to county jailer training on interacting with veterans in the criminal justice system.
The chair recognizes Ms. PLISA to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB 1282 provides county jailers with justice-involved veterans training developed by the Texas Veterans Commission and TCOL as part of their initial jailer certification. I move passage.
The question occurs on passing on engrossment of HB 1282. There's a record vote. The clerk read the bill. Should Ms. PLISA voting aye? Should Ms. Garcia voting aye? Have all members voted? Show Mr. Patterson voting nay. Have all members voted? There being 74 ayes and 68 nays, HB 1282 is passed on engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading, HB 1487. The clerk read the bill.
HB 1487 by Gerdes, relating to the creation of a rural county law enforcement grant program.
The chair recognizes Mr. Gerdes to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1487 creates a rural county law enforcement grant program, and I have an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk read the amendment.
Amendment by Murr.
The chair recognizes Mr. Murr to explain the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, members, this amendment simply adds district attorneys, criminal DAs, and county attorneys with criminal prosecution duties to the bill so that they can participate in the grant program, and I believe it is acceptable to the author.
Mr. Morrison, the amendment is acceptable. Author's objection to the adoption of the amendment. The chair has done. The amendment is adopted. The chair recommends Mr. Gerdes to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage.
The question occurs to pass on engrossment. HB 1487. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 1487 is passed on engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 1577. The clerk read the bill.
HB 1577 by whole related to changing the eligibility for mandatory supervision of an inmate serving a sentence for previously convicted of certain assaults.
The chair recognizes Ms. Hull to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill relates to changing the eligibility for mandatory supervision of an inmate serving a sentence for or previously convicted of certain assaults. Move passage.
The question occurs to pass on engrossment. HB 1577. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 1577 passed on engrossment.
Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 1667. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 1667 by Jeton relating to the reporting of child abuse or neglect.
Chair recognizes Representative Jeton to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 1667 makes changes to laws governing reporting of suspicious child abuse and neglect. We have amendments.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Jeton.
Chair recognizes Representative Jeton to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The floor amendment clarifies provider obligation and allows DFPS to conduct and implement a study to allow us to see the success and leverage for any improvements for the future. I move adoption.
Representative Jeton sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Wu.
Chair recognizes Representative Wu to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is an amendment to fix one of the more problematic parts of the bill, so to make sure that if a non-professional person sees actual sexual abuse, physical abuse, or a sexual assault, that they're still required by law to report it, and it is acceptable to the author.
Representative Wu sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Swanson.
Chair recognizes Representative Swanson to read the amendment.
This is a clarifying amendment, and it is approved by the author.
Mr. Representative Speaker. Swanson sends up an amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Sweener, for what purpose?
Will the gentlelady yield for some
questions? Will the
questions?
gentlelady explain the amendment? Does the lady yield? The lady yields.
My apologies, Representative Swanson. I'm just trying to understand what this amendment does.
This bill, this amendment, it's just making sure that it doesn't conflict with a previous bill that we already passed out of here, this House Bill 63.
And what did House Bill 63 do? I'm sorry that this is related to?
That had to do with CPS reporting, so we're just making sure the two bills don't conflict.
Okay, so this doesn't change the substance of what is required to be reported?
It's real hard to understand. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I apologize, Mr. Speaker. It is really difficult to hear.
Members, please take your conversation outside the rail.
So, Representative Swanson, this doesn't affect what's required to be reported? Or does this affect what is required to be reported to DFPS? Your amendment?
No, it merely says if House Bill 63, which we already passed out of here quite a while back, if it passes, then this little portion that conflicted will then it will be null and void. And we'll go with, on this little section with 63.
Thank you, Representative Swanson. Just wanted to make sure we understood.
Representative Swanson sends up an amendment. It is acceptable to the authors. Any objections? Here is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Chetan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage. Question
occurs on passage to engrossment, House Bill 1667. Is there, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 1667. Members, a record vote has been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Click voting aye. Show Representative Vasut voting aye. Representative Leach voting aye. Have all voted? Speaker. Show Representative Leach voting aye. There being 99 ayes and 42 nays, House Bill 1667 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays that on second reading, House Bill 1990. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 1990 by Wu relating to requiring the Department of Family and Protective Services to notify certain individuals of changes to child abuse and neglect investigation reports.
Chair recognizes Representative Wu to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members, this bill would require CPS to inform everyone in a case if they go backwards and change stuff that they've already submitted to let everyone know that they've made a change in their bill. Move passage.
Question. Following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Wu.
Chair recognizes Representative Wu to explain the amendment.
This amendment corrects a drafting error.
Representative Wu sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the authors. Any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Wu.
Move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment of House Bill 1990. A record vote has been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. So Representative Leach voting nay. Representative Vasut voting nay. Representative Click voting nay. Have all voted? There means 76 ayes and 69 nays. House Bill 1990 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out second reading House Bill 1367. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 1367 by Vasut relating to the violation of certain laws and provisions of governing instruments by and the recall by property owners of a Property Owners Association board member.
Chair recognizes Representative Vasut to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill provides remedies to owners in an HOA to be able to remove board directors that are violating the law. This passed out of the House last session unanimously. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment, House Bill 1367. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 1367 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2625. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2625 by Moody relating to the formation of a municipal housing authority asset commission by certain municipal housing authorities.
Chair recognizes Representative Moody to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members.
Mr. Speaker?
Dr. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Will the gentleman yield?
Not at this time.
Not at this time.
Members, this is a bill narrowly tailored to our housing authority back in El Paso. It's spent the last decade transforming a portfolio of aging public housing into modern, fully remodeled affordable housing that was largely done through what's known as rental assistance demonstration, or RAD, which allowed owners of these housing projects the opportunity to enter into long-term contracts that included financing improvements. On the operational side of things, RAD diversified our housing authority's portfolio and greatly increased its assets and liquidity. It now oversees more than 7,000 units, and that's put it in the position of needing to protect and preserve these assets in the future. House Bill 2625 does that by allowing it to create an asset commission with fiduciary responsibility and high-level, long-term oversight. The commission would be a 5-member body of people qualified through relevant expertise in real estate finance and multifamily housing, and it would be tasked with reviewing any major sale or transfer of the housing authority's assets.
Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
Will the gentleman yield?
Does the gentleman yield?
I yield.
The gentleman yields.
Chairman Moody, who asked you to file this bill?
We'll work with our municipal housing authority in El Paso.
And why did you file this bill?
The assets that were previously being managed under federal program had asset management through HUD, had professional management, so that those assets were guided and were reviewed by experts in the field. When they went through the transition to RAD housing, that oversight at the federal level was removed. And so right now, the board of our municipal housing authority is referred to as HOME. Their board is the one that's making the decisions without any financial oversight. And so they are asking for an asset commission to be placed over the top of their decision making so that we have professionals that are overseeing these very complex assets.
And does any other public housing authority have this type of asset commission of which you are requesting the legislature to pass?
I'm not familiar if anybody else in the state has this. I know that our city housing authority is asking for it.
Have you heard concerns regarding your bill?
I have.
Have you?
From you.
Have I expressed concerns to you about your piece of legislation?
Yes, I have heard. You have expressed some concerns, and I have heard concerns from the County Commissioner's Court in El Paso.
Mr. Speaker.
Dr. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
I very regretfully raise a point of order against further consideration of House Bill 2626, Rule 4, Section 32C1, on the grounds the bill analysis is materially misleading.
Bring your order down front. The point of order is withdrawn. Chair recognizes Mr. Moody to explain the bill. Some more.
As I was saying, this asset commission is, well, I'm trying to be courteous yet. This asset commission sits over the top of the board. So what they would do is when they're going to dispose of assets.
Mr. Speaker,
Dr. Gonzalez, for what purpose?
I raise a point of order against further consideration of House Bill 2625, Rule 8, Section 10B.
Bring your point of order down front. The point of order is withdrawn. Chair recognizes Representative Moody to further explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and I do appreciate your patience in this conversation. This is a very real issue that we've got back home that Representative Gonzalez and I have been attempting to. What's going on, sir, is that something very important in my community is being debated on the House floor, and I would give you the same time and respect. This is an important issue that we've been debating for years back home.
Members, please take your conversation outside the rail. Chair recognizes Representative Moody.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a years-long discussion about the authority and the jurisdiction and the operations of our housing authority in the city of El Paso and how that butts up against the county. This is one of the rare issues that my friend and I, Dr. Gonzalez, differ greatly upon. I'm glad that this bill is here on the floor. I'm glad that we had a debate about it. But out of respect for her county commissioner, and the county officials in El Paso I've heard from, I move to postpone further consideration of House Bill 2625 until January 9th, 2024.
Members, you heard the motion. Is there objection? Chair is none. The motion is adopted. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2266. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2266 by Leach, relating to judicial review of certain local laws applicable to state license holders.
Chair recognizes Representative Leach to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a judicial review of local laws bill. I think there's an amendment to the bill.
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Wu, for what purpose?
I rise to raise panel order against further consideration of House Bill 2266 under Rule 4, Section 32, on the grounds that the bill analysis is materially misleading.
Bring your point of order down front, Mr. Wu. Point of order is withdrawn. Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Leach.
Chair recognizes Representative Leach to explain his amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this makes my bill a lot better. I'm going to accept the amendment.
Somewhat of an explanation by Representative Leach. Since up an amendment, it's acceptable to the author. Is there objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Following, Chair recognizes Representative Leach to close.
There's another amendment coming.
Chair recognizes Representative Leach.
Move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment of House Bill 2266. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Stop it. House Bill 2266 passed to engrossment. Members, the next bill on the calendar is House Bill 2081. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 820. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 820 by Cold Course relating to the registration of vision support organizations, imposing a fee, requiring an occupational registration, providing a civil penalty.
Chair recognizes Representative Click to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. SB 820 will define and require registration for vision support organizations. Mr. Speaker, I do have an amendment.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Click.
Chair recognizes Representative Click to explain the amendment.
Members, this amendment just adds ophthalmologists to the optometrist ownership interest exemption for 3 or less locations. It is acceptable to the author, and I move adoption.
Representative Click sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is any objection? Chair has none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Click.
Members, to address a concern I've heard, I want to clearly state that this bill does not shift any regulatory authority from the Texas Medical Board to the Texas Optometry Board. I move passage.
Question occurs on passage to third reading, Senate Bill 820. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. Senate Bill 820 is passed to third reading. Representative Click moves to lay House Bill 2081 on the table, subject to call. Is there objection? Chair is none. Motion is adopted. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2702. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2702 by Guillen relating to payments associated with certain medical examinations under the workers' compensation system, imposing a fee.
Chair recognizes Representative Guillen to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill reinstates the no-show payment for designated doctors, and I move passage.
Question occurs on passage. Following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Hey, who's doing your bill? I'm doing something too.
Amendment by Guillen.
Chair recognizes Representative Guillen to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this strikes last set or adjusted by the Commissioner and substitutes it with initially adopted or last adjusted by the Commissioner, and I move adoption.
Representative Guillen sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the authors. Any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Guillen.
Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment of House Bill 2702. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 2702 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays that on second reading House Bill 3862. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3862 by Goldman relating to information on the transfer of license plates included in the application for title and registration of a motor vehicle.
Chair recognizes Representative Landgraf to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a good bill which relates to information on the transfer of license plates included in an application for title and registration of a motor vehicle. I move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment House Bill 3862. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 3862 is passed to engrossment. Thank you, Mr. Landgraf. Chair lays that on second reading House Bill 3810. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3810 by Landgraf relating to certain notices provided to the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality by Public Water Supply Systems.
Chair recognizes Representative Landgraf to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 3810 helps ensure that safe and adequate drinking water is consistently provided to residents of Texas. I believe there's an amendment.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Landgraf.
Chair recognizes Representative Landgraf to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment clarifies that House Bill 3810 applies to non-industrial public water supply systems and includes unplanned conditions that have caused or are likely to cause a public water supply outage. Also make sure that atmospheric and meteorological conditions are exempt from the provisions. It's acceptable to the author, and I move adoption.
Representative Landgraf sends up amendment. It's acceptable to the authors. Any objections? Chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. Following amendment. Chair recognizes Representative Landgraf to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment. House Bill 3810. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 3810 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays that on second reading. House Bill 3949. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3949 by Rainey, relating to the arbitration of a controversy between members of an association or corporation and between an association or corporation and its members.
Chair recognizes Representative Rainey to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, nonprofits who are designated as 501c3s can enter into arbitration within its membership. The arbitration provision does not apply to certain nonprofits. HB 3949 seeks to allow the excluded entities the same benefit as a 501c3 has with regard to the ability to seek arbitration with its membership. There is amendment.
Question. Following amendment. Clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Rainey.
Chair recognizes Representative Rainey to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment assures that the bill will not impact current law with respect to Property Owners Association. It is acceptable to the author, and I move adoption.
Representative Rainey sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the authors. Any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Rainey to close.
Move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment. House Bill 3949. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 3949 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3752. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3752 by Kane, relating to statutory damages and actions brought by social media users against social media platforms for prohibited censorship.
Chair recognizes Representative Kane to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I think we got a question, though.
Representative Wu, for what purpose?
Speaker, I raise a point of order against further consideration of House Bill 3752 under Rule 4, Section 32, that the bill analysis is substantially materially misleading. Need some help.
Bring a point of order down front, Mr. Wu. The point of order is withdrawn. Chair recognizes Representative Kane for a motion.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I move to postpone further consideration of House Bill 3752 until March 3rd, 2024, Gene Wu's birthday.
Members who hear the motion, is there objection? Chair is none. The motion is adopted. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3346. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3346 by Jones of Harris relating to the administration of medication to certain persons in the custody of a sheriff.
Doc, you're not. Chair recognizes Representative Jones of Harris to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB 3346, the continuation of mental health meds bill, aims to ensure that individuals in the custody of the sheriffs have access to the necessary psych meds prescribed to them by the state hospital.
Dr.
This
Stuckey,
will
for
help
what
them
purpose?
maintain
May I ask
their...
a question, the author?
Will the gentlelady yield for questions?
Yes, I will yield
She
for
yields.
a question. Yes, I will yield for questions.
This bill went through county affairs, and I had a couple questions. One was, is this an unfunded mandate for counties and county jails, or is it something that can be reimbursed by the state?
There'll be a reimbursement to the sheriffs, which is why the sheriffs and police support it.
The second question I have is, my county commissioners tell me that if these inmates stay on medication regularly, that not only will they come in on them, if they stay on them, they'll end up being in the county jail less days and save the county money. Is that correct?
I'm sorry.
Is that correct? Is it
Yes,
allowing them
so
to
it's
stay
actually
on?
going to save the county jail's money, because what ends up happening is people go to jail, they find them incompetent, they're just there waiting. They send them to a state hospital to get them meds to make them competent. They get them competent, bring them back to the sheriff's departments, and then if they don't continue their meds, then they go back incompetent and they're there forever. So that, again, that's why the sheriffs and police support it.
Representative Jones, it's a great bill. Thank you for bringing this to us.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 3346. A record vote's been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Jones of Harris voting aye. Have all voted. Show Representative Theory voting aye. That means 74 ayes and 68 nays. House Bill 3346 passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3603. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3603 by Anderson relating to the payment of restitution by a person released on parole or to mandatory supervision.
Chair recognizes Dr. Anderson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this is a simple bill that deals with payments from the parolees to the Crime Victim Fund and simplifies the record keeping. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 3603. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 3603 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3452. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3452 by Jatan relating to complaints submitted to and sanctions issued by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct.
Chair recognizes Representative Jatan to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 3452 seeks to ensure there is adequate and timely accountability for judges that are sanctioned by the State Commission on Judicial Conduct. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 3452. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill. Members, a record vote has been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Have all voted. Show Representative Kane voting aye. 93 ayes and 41 nays. House Bill 3452 is passed to engrossment. Members, the next bill on the calendar is House Bill 3184. The Senate companion is over and eligible. The chair lays out on second reading Senate Bill 1457. The clerk will read the bill.
SB 1457 by Zafrini relating to guardianships and the delivery of certain notices or other communications in connection with guardianship proceedings.
Chair recognizes Representative Thompson of Harris to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members allow certain guardianship notices to be sent by other methods like UPS and FedEx to allow an attorney ad litem to accept service on behalf of a proposed ward and move passage.
Question occurs on passage at third reading Senate Bill 1457. As a record vote has been requested, a record vote is granted. The clerk will read the bill. Have all voted. 131 ayes and 0 nays. Senate Bill 1457 is passed at third reading. Representative Thompson of Harris moves to lay House Bill 3184 on the table. Subject to calls. Is there objection? Chair is none. The motion is adopted. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3009. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3009 by Van Dever relating to the healthcare providers authorized to examine a person to determine whether the person is incapacitated for purposes of certain guardianship proceedings.
Chair recognizes Representative Van Dever to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill provides families the opportunity to have APRNs dealing with possible commitment decisions. I believe there's an amendment.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Van Dever.
Chair recognizes Representative Van Dever to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this amendment makes it clear that this bill does not change current scope of practice. It is acceptable to the author. I move adoption.
Representative Van Dever sends up an amendment that is acceptable to the author. Is any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Van Dever.
Move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment of House Bill 3009. As record vote has been requested, record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Representative Garcia voting aye. Have all voted? Representative Rosenthal voting aye. There being 138 ayes and 6 nays, House Bill 3009 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 3220. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 3220 by Garcia relating to an assessment on the use of surplus government property to provide housing to homeless veterans.
Chair recognizes Representative Garcia to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House Bill 3220 would create a study on the use of government surplus property to house homeless veterans in Texas. This bill would implement a recommendation from the Texas Coordinating Council for Veteran Service Interim Report and will help our state better serve those who have served our country. Mr. Speaker, I move passage.
Question occurs on passage to engrossment House Bill 3220. A record vote has been requested. Record vote is granted. Clerk will ring the bell. Chair Representative Garcia voting aye. Chair Representative Collier voting aye. Have all voted? There being 101 ayes and 40 nays, House Bill 3220 is passed to engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 895. Clerk will ring the bell.
HB 895 by Munoz Jr. relating to the use of extrapolation by a health maintenance organization or insured to audit claims.
Chair recognizes Representative Munoz to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker,
Representative Tenderholt, for what purpose?
raise pointer against further consideration of House Bill 895 under Rule 4, Section 32C. Grounds the background and purpose statement in the bill analysis is fatally flawed.
Bring your point order down front, Mr. Tenderholt. Point of order is withdrawn. Chair recognizes Representative Munoz.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage.
Question occurs on passed through engrossment. House Bill 895. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 895 is passed through engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 408. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 408 by Collier relating to the eligibility requirements for a license to carry a handgun.
Chair recognizes Representative Collier to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, if you could just indulge me for a moment because I need to take a little time to explain this bill. Individuals who successfully complete deferred adjudication for the charge of non-aggravated robbery or burglary of a habitat can constitutionally carry under current law. However, there's a discrepancy in our law regarding the impact of completing deferred adjudication for certain offenses. The Texas Penal Code allows courts to place a person on deferred adjudication for certain offenses, and if that person successfully completes all of the conditions of that court's order, their charge does not result in a final conviction. However, if we move over to the local government code, we see that even if a person successfully completes the condition of the court's order of deferred adjudication with 10 years of no disqualifying behavior, they are still considered to be convicted for the purposes of attaining a license to carry, thereby making them ineligible. Now, there are instances where Texans seeking employment opportunities need to have a license to carry, but because of the way the word conviction is interpreted in the local government code, the law does not afford them that opportunity. I have to continue to read this because I want it to be very clear what we're doing. If a person was given deferred adjudication for the offense of non-aggravated robbery or burglary of a habitat, the state believes that person, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not going to move passage because I'm going to continue to read. If a person, let me start over, okay? If a person was given deferred adjudication for the offense of non-aggravated robbery or burglary of a habitat, the state believes that person has the ability to be rehabilitated. But this is nearly impossible if barriers are still in place. No, I need to read this because this is a gun bill, okay? And I want to be on the record of what we're doing here. That prevent them from let me go back. If a person was given deferred adjudication for the offense of non-aggravated robbery or burglary of a habitat, the state believes that person has the ability to be rehabilitated. But this is nearly impossible if barriers are still in place that prevent them from providing for themselves and or their family. If this bill does pass, we are still saying deferred adjudications for aggravated robbery and felony burglaries in the first degree are excluded for the purposes of handgun license eligibility. So here's the bottom line. If someone can live 10 years without committing a disqualifying offense, they should qualify to enter the handgun license program. And to be clear as I possibly can, this bill would not expand access to firearms, as these individuals already are eligible to carry a firearm under the constitutional carry. But it does open the future possibilities for those individuals it impacts. And with that, I move passage.
Question occurs on passed through engrossment. House Bill 408. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 408 is passed through engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 1351. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 1351 by Hernandez relating to the distribution of funds designated for the Low-Income Vehicle Repair Assistance, Reprofit, and Accelerated Vehicle Retirement Program.
Chair recognizes Representative Hernandez to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This bill seeks to distribute funds back to counties that voluntarily participated in the LIREP program. Currently, LIREP still exists in statute, but the funds have not been distributed since 2018. As a result, counties in the program ended the collection of the surcharge. This bill would require TCEQ to return the fees collected for LIREP back to the participating counties to fund eligible air quality initiatives. I move passage.
Question occurs to pass through engrossment House Bill 1351. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 1351 is passed through engrossment. Chair lays that on second reading House Bill 1529. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 1529 by Compost relating to procedures in certain suits affecting the parent-child relationship filed by the Department of Family and Protective Services.
Chair recognizes Representative Compost to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have an amendment.
Following amendment, clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Cook.
Chair recognizes Representative Cook to explain the amendment.
Okay. Yes, this amendment just adds an exception to the exclusion rule and move adoption.
Representative Cook sends up an amendment. It's acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Representative Campos to close.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, DFPS investigators are required to notify individuals of their right to record interviews and to request administrative reviews. This bill introduces a court requirement to ensure that the department is following the laws that were established last session. I move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 1529. A record vote has been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Vasut voting nay. Have all voted? There being 91 ayes and 42 nays, House Bill 1529 is passed in engrossment. Chair lays that on second reading. House Bill 1985. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 1985 by Vasut relating to the service credit used in calculating longevity pay for certain judges and justices with prior full-time service as an associate judge.
Chair recognizes Representative Vasut to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House Bill 1985 allows a judge to count full-time services of a district court towards years of service credit for salary enhancements under the government code. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 1985. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 1985 is passed in engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2327. Clerk will read the bill. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2327 by Goldman relating to an exemption to the renewal requirement for an agriculture and timber tax exemption registration numbers issued to or held by persons who are at least 65 years of age.
Chair recognizes Representative Lozano to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill is a great bill that helps those over 65 that have a timber ag exemption. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 2327 to engrossment. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 2327 is passed to engrossment. Thank you, Representative Lozano. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2019. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2019 by Niavi Curado relating to the statute of limitations for certain burglary offenses.
Chair recognizes Representative Niavi Curado to explain the amendment.
Thank you,
to
Mr.
explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, because we built on the rape kit backlog and getting rape kits tested, now cases are being solved, and there's a 5-year statute of limitations for burglary of a habitation with intent to commit sexual assault. So this addresses occult cases in a very narrow circumstance where DNA has not yet been tested. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 2019. A record vote is being requested. A record vote is granted. Clerk will ring the bell. Have all voted? There being 137 ayes and 2 nays, House Bill 2019 is passed in engrossment. Chair lays out on second reading House Bill 2297. Clerk will read the bill.
HB 2297 by Holland relating to compensation and leave for certain peace officers.
Chair recognizes Representative Holland to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill achieves pay parity between TCOL officers and other state peace officers to compensate TCOL peace officers at a rate consistent with their peers at other state agencies. Move passage.
Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 2297. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 2297 is passed in. A record vote's been requested. Sorry, members. Question occurs on passage and engrossment. House Bill 2297. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. House Bill 2297 is passed to engrossment. Members, we have 2 motions to reconsider on bills that were failed earlier today. First bill will be House Bill 2401. Chair recognizes Dr. Gonzalez of El Paso for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move to reconsider the vote by which House Bill 2401 was defeated.
Members, you heard the motion. Is there objection? Chair is none. The motion is adopted. Chair lays that on second reading, House Bill 2401. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2401 by Oliverson relating to the repeal of certain contracting requirements under the Medicaid managed care delivery model.
Chair recognizes Dr. Oliverson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to say thank you to my colleagues, Representative Gonzalez, Representative Johnson of Dallas, Representative Martinez Fisher, Representative Chairman James Frank. We've literally been working on this all day to get to language that everybody can live with. Members, I think this is something, once we put an amendment on this bill, that you will all be able to proudly vote for and say that we stood up for our kids and we stood up for our districts and we honored our commitments all together. And so with that, I believe there's an amendment.
Following
and it's
amendment,
acceptable
clerk will
to
read
me.
the amendment.
Amendment by Gonzalez
Chair
El Paso.
recognizes Dr. Gonzalez to explain the amendment.
Members, all I can say is today I really, really love the House. Earlier today, we had a big debate about the future of healthcare plans. And earlier today, lots of people stood at this front mic and said the decisions we make will have a very serious impact on our hospital districts. And there was an opportunity because people voted to say, hey, maybe we're going too far. And the opportunity created the space for good government to happen. Now we have come to, when we had a conversation with Chairman Frank about making this work, we have now actualized that through this amendment, and it's something we are all agreed upon. I want to thank the members who voted. I want to thank Chair Alverson. I want to thank Chair Frank and all of the people who have worked really hard to make this happen to protect our hospital districts, and I move passage.
Dr. Gonzalez sends up the amendment. The chair recognizes Representative Johnson of Dallas to speak in favor of the amendment.
Members, I want to be clear about something about this amendment. The interested parties and many of you in this body were very, very concerned about the retroactivity piece of this legislation and the unconstitutionality of that. And I want everyone to know that that has been corrected in this amendment. And this is a very good bill, and I will be supporting it at this time. So I hope you all will as well. Thank you.
Dr. Gonzalez sends up the amendment. It is acceptable to the author. Is there any objection? Chair is none. The amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Dr. Alverson.
Move passage.
Question occurs on final passage of House Bill 2297. It's a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Representative Johnson of Dallas voting aye. Have all voted? 140 ayes and 0 nays. House Bill 2297 is finally passed. Members, there being 140 ayes and 0 nays, House Bill 2401 was finally passed. Finally. Members, the next bill for consideration is House Bill 4918. Chair recognizes Representative Allison for a motion.
Speaker, I move to reconsider the vote by which House Bill 4918 was defeated. Move passage.
Members, you've heard the motion. A record vote has been requested. A record vote is... Chair recognizes Representative Kane to speak in favor of the motion to reconsider.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, real quick. So we're going to reconsider this bill. I need you all to know something. I've got a rule as a committee chair that every member of my committee gets to participate and pass a bill off of this floor. Representative Roselaw is the last one. It's a great bill, and he's getting caught up in politics. I ask you to vote yes on the motion to reconsider.
Question occurs on the motion to reconsider. Record on House Bill 4918. A record vote has been requested. A record vote is granted. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Rosenthal voting aye. Representative Kane voting aye. Have all voted? There being 97 ayes and 31 nays, the motion prevails. Chair lays out on third reading House Bill 4918. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 4918 by Rosenthal relating to the processing and manufacturing of consumable hemp products for smoking.
Chair recognizes Representative Rosenthal to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The bill lets our homegrown producers be competitive. Move passage.
Question occurs on final passage of House Bill 4918. A record vote. Clerk will ring the bell. Show Representative Rosenthal voting aye. Show Representative Bowers voting aye. Have all voted? There being 84 ayes and 59 nays, House Bill 4918 is finally passed.
Thank you.
The chair lays out on second reading HB 2043. The clerk read the bill.
HB 2043 by Bowers relating to a criminal justice system pretrial and sentencing database established by the Office of Court Administration of the Texas Judicial System.
The chair recognizes Ms. Bowers to explain the bill. Ms. Emanuel, for purpose.
Mr. Speaker, I move to have the remarks from Representative Collier reduced to writing on HB 408 and placed in the journal, please.
Members of the motion is objected. Chair has none so ordered. The chair recognizes Ms. Bowers to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I first want to say thank you to all the members from both sides of the aisle that came up and shared with me that there were issues with this piece of legislation, but also members that said we can find a fix. I want to propose a interim study, and I move to postpone further consideration of HB 2043 until my birthday, July 22nd of the year 2023.
Members of the motion is objection. Chair has none so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HB 2646. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2646 by J. Johnson of Harris relating to the payment of certain fines and court costs by an inmate during a term of imprisonment or following release from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice.
The chair recognizes Mr. Johnson of Harris to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill simply gives those who are being released from prison a 180-day grace period as opposed to making them pay 30 days outside of being released. They often need that first 30 days to find out where they're going to live and then get employment. So this simply gives them 180 days. It does not change the fees or fines that they have to pay, and they still have to check in with their probation officer. I move passage.
The question occurs on passage of engrossment HB 2646. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Johnson of Harris voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 81 ayes, 62 nays. HB 2646 is passed. The chair lays out on third reading HB 5081. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 5081 by Wilson relating to the authority of the Department of Public Safety to set a maximum fee for certain motor vehicle safety inspections.
The chair recognizes Mr. Wilson to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Bill 5081 sets the portion of a car inspection fee that a licensed inspection station can keep to the hourly rate minimum of a Schedule A6 state employee. Move passage.
The question occurs on passage of engrossment HB 5081. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Wilson voting aye. Have all members voted? So Ms. Jones of Harris voting aye. There being 134 ayes, 7 nays. HB 5081 is passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 3957. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 3957 by Smith relating to the establishment of a rapid DNA analysis pilot program in certain counties.
The chair recognizes Mr. Smith to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This will create a pilot program for rapid DNA testing, and I move passage.
The question occurs on passage of engrossment at HB 3957. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 3957 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 4540. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 4540 by Longoria relating to the state salary for retired judges.
The chair recognizes Mr. Longoria to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. HB 4540 would recalibrate the annuities for retired state judges under JRS 1, JRS 2. This will not increase nor in any way impact our pay or retirement. I move passage.
The question occurs in passing engrossment HB 4540. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Mr. Longoria voting aye. Mr. Smith voting aye. Ms. Jones of Harris voting aye. Mr. Bojani voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 116 ayes, 30 nays, HB 4540 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 4771. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 4771 by Bojani relating to the creation of tenant legal service offices by local governments to assist low-income residential tenants in eviction cases and in cases involving discrimination based on the tenant's disabilities.
The chair recognizes Mr. Bojani to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, HB 4771 allows the city or county to create a tenant legal services office to provide legal representation and services to low-income and disabled residential tenants. I move passage.
The question occurs passed in engrossment HB 4771. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. So Mr. Bojani voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 69 ayes and 75 nays, HB 4771 fails to pass the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 649. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 649 by Hinojosa relating to consideration of education-related income and determining eligibility of applicants for residential tenancies.
The chair recognizes Ms. Hinojosa to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I move to postpone further consideration of House Bill 649 until Thursday at 4 p.m.
Members heard the motion. The objection. Chair hears none, so ordered. The chair lays out on second reading HB 2242. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2242 by Howard relating to the use of dynamic message signs for Keep 'em Safe Texas gun storage campaign.
The chair recognizes Ms. Howard to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this legislation calls for the use of the text dynamic message signs to be used to promote DPS's campaign for safe gun storage in vehicles and serve as a reminder for gun owners to safely store their firearms to avoid potential firearm thefts, just like we did last session in passing Representative Landgraf's bill to use text signs for active shooter alerts. Move passage.
The question occurs in passing the engrossment HB 2242. This is a record vote. The clerk will ring the bell. Show Ms. Howard voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 76 ayes, 66 nays, HB 2242 is passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 2476. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2476 by Garcia relating to the adoption of a Veterans Land Bank program by the Texas State Affordable Housing Corporation.
The chair recognizes Ms. Garcia to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. House Bill 2476 would establish a Veterans Land Bank to put foreclosed property back on the tax rolls while increasing the supply of affordable homes and rental housing for veterans. Mr. Speaker, I believe there's an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Garcia.
The chair recognizes Ms. Garcia to explain the amendment.
Mr. Speaker, this is a perfecting amendment that will clarify the definition of affordability so that it applies to both single-family homes and rental housing developed under the Land Bank program. It is acceptable to the author, and I move adoption.
Ms. Garcia sends up an amendment. The amendment is acceptable to the author. The objection to the adoption amendment. The chair hears none. The amendment is adopted. The chair recommends Ms. Garcia to close on the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage.
The question occurs in passing the engrossment HB 2476. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 2476 is passed the engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 2234. The clerk will read the bill.
HB 2234 by Thompson of Harris relating to certain policies and procedures for the placement and use of video cameras in certain classrooms, including classrooms that provide special education services.
The chair recognizes Ms. Thompson of Harris to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members, this involves special needs children
It provides a better outcome for children with disabilities. It clarifies that the school safety allotment may include the purchase of special education classroom cameras, and it extends the video retention period from 3 months to 6 months. I move passage.
The question occurs on passing engrossment of HB 2234. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. The ayes have it. HB 2234 is passed in engrossment. The chair lays out on second reading HB 3266, and the clerk will read the bill.
HB 3266 by Frazier, relating to the prosecution of the criminal offense of the possession, manufacture, transport, repair, or sale of certain devices intended to modify handguns.
The chair recognizes Mr. Frazier to explain the bill.
Mr. Speaker, members, this is a law enforcement bill. What's been happening is that you haven't been seeing these Sears being sold on the black market in our streets, mostly to gang members, to convert these weapons into machine guns within seconds. We've had an officer killed in Houston already. We've had several officers shot in Houston. We've had several officers in gunfights with the same device. This bill will change that so that our law enforcement and local law enforcement can actually set up the prosecution and arrest them for that. I do have an amendment.
The following amendment, the clerk will read the amendment.
Amendment by Frazier.
The chair recognizes Mr. Frazier to explain the amendment.
The floor amendment simply creates an affirmative defense if you're in possession of a Sear and you legally own it, meaning that you're registered by the National Firearm Registration and it has a transferred record.
Mr. Speaker,
Ms. Johnson, for what purpose?
will the gentleman yield for some questions?
Will the gentleman yield for questions?
I will.
The gentleman yields.
Mr. Frazier, you've served for a number of years in law enforcement.
Yes, ma'am.
Would you tell us on this bill, why is it so significant that we have penalties or criminal punishments for people who will improperly use weapons? And how does that impact law enforcement safety on the streets?
Well, this is it's very impactful. For one, the weapon is converted by the piece that's being sold, and most of these are 3D printed. And when they're 3D printed, they're put in the weapon, changing them to fully automatic. You can put 1,200 rounds through this gun in seconds, and we've been seeing these on the street over and over and over. We've had ATF and other agencies come and ask us for the help to get a bill filed, to give us something to go out there and use, have a tool for law enforcement to be effective on making these arrests.
I appreciate your attention. I appreciate very greatly your service and the fact that law enforcement, the men in blue, as we always say in Houston, you put yourselves on the line every day. You run when fire is happening and you protect the rest of us. I'm proud to support your bill. And I thank you very much for bringing it.
I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Mr. Kane, for what
Hey
purpose?
there.
Mr. Kane, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on a point of order against further consideration of this amendment under Rule 11, Section 6D, I believe, and that this is an amendment that is longer than one page and is in the way of a substantial substitute and needed 12 hours of layout.
Please bring your point of order down front. The point of order has been withdrawn. The amendment has been withdrawn. Does any member wish to speak for, against, or on the bill? Seeing none, the chair recognizes Mr. Frazier to close on the bill.
No, we can run it. What's the status here? Drawn. Members, Speaker. So I'm going to close on this bill and let you know this bill has been supported by every law enforcement agency in the state of Texas, including prosecutors, including our sheriffs. Everyone came to testify. Everyone showed what the power is of this weapon when you put a sear in it. The sear is made in seconds, it's put in seconds, and it's sold on the street. It's just something we need to get our hands on, for our law enforcement to make that arrest, that significant arrest, and get this job done. We don't want these things on the street. Move passage.
The question occurs on passage to engrossment of HB 3266. This is a record vote. The clerk ring the bell. Show Mr. Frazier voting aye, Mr. Schaefer voting nay. Show Mr. Anchia voting aye. Have all members voted? There being 83 ayes and 57 nays, HB 3266 is passed on engrossment. The following bills and resolutions on first reading referral to committee. The clerk will read the bills and resolutions.
SB 1251 by Betancourt, refer to the Committee on Ways and Means. SB 1268 by Johnson, refer to the Committee on Insurance. SB 1557 by Parker, refer to the Committee on Public Education. SB 2370 by Campbell, refer to the Committee on County Affairs. SB 2434 by Betancourt, refer to the Committee on Urban Affairs. SB 2548 by Middleton, refer to the Committee on Juvenile Justice and Family Issues. SJR 81 by Birdwell, refer to the Committee on Higher Education. The following resolutions are being referred to the Committee on Resolutions Calendars. HR 1550 by Holland, HR 1551 by Holland. The following resolutions by Guerra being referred to the Committee on Resolutions Calendars. HRs 1552 through HRs 1554 and HRs 1560 through 1584. HR 1555 by Lambert, HR 1556 by Davis, HR 1557 by Buckley, HR 1558 by Buckley, HR 1585 by Morrison, HR 1586 by Morrison, HR 1587 by Reynolds, HR 1588 by Cassell, HR 1589 by Cassell, HR 1590 by Dutton, HR 1591 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1592 by Click, HR 1593 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1594 by Herrero, HR 1595 by Jaton, HR 1596 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1597 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1598 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1599 by A. Johnson of Harris, HR 1601 by Cunningham, HR 1602 by Cassell, HR 1603 by Thompson and Brazoria, HR 1604 by Lambert, HR 1605 by Timish, HR 1606 by Timish, HR 1607 by Turner, HR 1608 by Turner, HR 1609 by Turner.
Members, the Speaker's desk is clear. If you have any announcements, please bring them down front. Mr. Guerin moves the House adjourned until Thursday at 10 a.m. Is there objection? Chair hears none. The House stands adjourned.